Well, welcome back to the March workshop for the Colorado State Board of Land Commissioners. And we're about ready to embark on our conversation around GHG emissions. That'd be our staff. But before we maybe launch into that, I thought maybe I would at least help myself and then possibly my other fellow commissioners with a little bit of a framing of kind of the context for what we're trying to do here today. And I think the hope is that this is the first time we've really addressed this concept directly. It's in part response to some of the questions from especially our newer commissioners. And today's discussion really is about how do we think about and acknowledge and are there other actions we want to do about the negative impacts or what we call externalities about the ways we generate revenue? So this is really a conversation about what are the non-good things associated with what we're doing and how do we want to think about them as a commission? What's our role and our sense of responsibility about them? What are the risks? So we're hoping to have a wide-ranging conversation here today. Staff will help catalyze that with their presentation and kind of a beginning list of actions and possibilities that might aid our thinking. And of course, our other lines of revenue generation, not minerals, they also have negative consequences. And I have a feeling that we'll be raising those a little bit more than we have in the past as we either look at business plans or perhaps in our asset allocation exercise. So I hope today we sort of think of this topic also in the context of it's very timely with the revocation by the Trump administration of the endangerment ruling on greenhouse gas emissions, the war in Iran and gas prices and the feeling of lack of control over oil and gas supplies generally globally. These are all, I would remind us, factors that are so far out of our control that it is important to keep in this conversation sort of where we fit and how we might think about it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to sort of maybe talk about the expectations for the session and introduce.
Just hold on. One second. Yes, and for the record, today is Wednesday, March 11th, 2026, and you are listening to a meeting of the Colorado State Board of Land Commissioners meeting in our Denver office. We've got a published agenda that's out there for today, and today is intended to be a workshop. It's all information only. So we do not have a segment planned today for public comment, for what it's worth. And for those paying attention online, we are aware that our video is kind of choppy, but it feels like our audio remains pretty strong. So bear with us as we work through that today. But tomorrow is another day, and we'll hopefully have things in better order tomorrow. So with that.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Commissioner. This is Christopher Smith, the Assistant Director for Energy Innovation. And, we would love for this to be sort of a conversation. I think Crystal will present what we would like to get out of this, but really a lot of that is hearing from you. She's going to present some good ideas and talk about those ideas and other ideas that you may have around this topic. So.
All right, with that, Crystal Cranda, Minerals Director. Good afternoon, commissioners. Today, I'm going to be diving in on greenhouse gas reduction strategy related to mineral development on state trust land. So we are here today to have a discussion about whether staff should research additional greenhouse gas reduction strategies related to mineral development on trust lands. So roughly 2 years ago, almost now, I did an internal memo looking up these strategies, and that was related specifically to oil and gas. More recently, Ben looked at what a lot of the solid mineral mining companies are doing related to solid minerals, and I'm going to present that information to you and in the end, see if the board is interested in pursuing any of these options and having staff look into the viability of these options. So an outline of what I'll be discussing today, we will talk a little bit about background for greenhouse gases, goals that the state has, and some key understandings I want the board to be aware of. And then we will dive into the different strategies that we looked into. So background. So why did I start researching this a couple years ago? I think it's known that certain activities emit greenhouse gas emissions, which is resulting in climate change. And this figure, or this image, I just like because it's showing that greenhouse gases are coming from a lot of different industries. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. We can't just shut down one industry and it goes away. We're going to have to address the problem by looking at all the industries where greenhouse gases are being emitted. As I said, when greenhouse gases are released and trapped in the atmosphere, they lead to climate change, the increase of the global temperature. And these are some of the effects of climate change. The reason that staff is monitoring this is because these effects can impact the long-term productivity of trust lands. And so that's really the reason why we're looking into this, is because we understand there's some sort of impact on trust lands. Now, this is a global issue. In the memo, I stated how China is currently contributing 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally. The United States is second with 11% of emissions. But in order to tackle this problem, it needs to be looked at from a global perspective. Nation-wise, this is a figure just showing that the top 10 emitters in the United States emit roughly 50% of the US emissions. And so Colorado is over here on the right. We are a pretty average emitter. We represent 1.85% of that 11% that I referenced earlier. So what are all the nations doing to address this problem? The US in 2015 signed the Paris Climate Agreement. This is a legally binding treaty, and all the countries are working together to limit the temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius. And as of 2025, 197 countries had signed this agreement except for Iran, Libya, and Yemen. However, in January of this year, the United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement and is no longer pursuing any sort of actions federally. So what is the state doing now that we have no federal direction on this? States are now doing these actions individually, and 24 states have joined the U.S. Climate Alliance. And this map shows in blue the states that have joined the alliance. And as you can see, Colorado is one of those states. And the Climate Alliance is continuing forward with the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And these states have signed on to continue pursuing those. Colorado specifically has 2 different roadmaps that have been implemented to get us to those Paris Climate Agreement goals. And one is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Roadmap 2.0. And if the board recalls, a year or 2 ago, Aaron Ray came and spoke to the board about this roadmap and what the state is working on. And last spring, Quinn Annis with the Colorado Energy Office came to the board to discuss what is happening with the Colorado Carbon Management Roadmap. The State Land Board is mentioned in these, but has a role. The regulatory agencies take the major role in these roadmaps, and the State Land Board is focused more on our leasing activities that have ancillary benefits of greenhouse gas reductions. This is just a figure that kind of highlights some of the key things that have happened since implementation of a lot of the regulations that are being put in place for these roadmaps, and just the regulations in general here in Colorado. So CDPHE has reported that there's been a 75% drop in sites detected with methane leaks. And in 2014, the state here, we were the first state to approve methane level regulations. And a lot of this was about leak detection equipment that needs to be put on oil and gas sites. And the Environmental Defense Fund just did a study showing that there's been a 70% methane emission reduction from 2010 to 2017. And then GEM laws. I know Ben had the CDPHE come in a couple of months ago to talk about GEM laws for industrial facilities, but you can see here that those are having a good impact for the industrial sector too, with a lot of tons being reduced from the atmosphere as well. So now I want to focus on some key things that I would like the board to understand before we dive into the strategies. So what is the role for the land board in reducing greenhouse gas emissions? I would be remiss if I didn't put up the fiduciary duty. And the board does have a legal and ethical obligation to act in the best interest of trust beneficiaries. And I think that we've seen from these slides that greenhouse gases do have some sort of impact on trust lands. And we just need to make sure any strategy we pursue is tied to protecting that economic productivity of trust lands and making sure that there's that tie there to our fiduciary duty. So I wanted to walk through these two terms and just make sure the board is clear and understands the difference here, because I think when looking at carbon pledges, these two terms are thrown out and they're very different. So carbon neutral, this is when a company offsets their carbon emissions. They directly offset their carbon emissions. So first, this is only talking about carbon. It's not talking about other greenhouse gases. So they're only addressing carbon. But second, an example would be if a company emits 100 tons of carbon, they will offset 100 tons of carbon. This could be by buying carbon credits. This could be planting trees that absorb carbon. So they can achieve that in different means, but they are basically offsetting their carbon footprint. And this doesn't mean that they're necessarily reducing their carbon footprint. They're just offsetting it. Now, net zero, the difference here is that a company looks at their entire supply chain, and at each part of the supply chain, they look at every process to see, can we first reduce emissions? And they try to implement all policies possible to reduce emissions. And then at the very end, if they cannot reduce anymore, then they offset. So cement, for example, when creating cement, there are emissions that are released that are unavoidable. And so they might, a cement company might look to offset, their electricity they purchase, go down their supply chain. But when they get to the cement manufacturing, there's no way to offset all emissions, or not offset, but there's no way to not create those emissions. And so they would offset those. So that's the key difference there. There's also the terms scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So scope 1 emissions are the direct emissions from a company that they're producing when they are mining. So for oil and gas, if they flare, if they vent their company vehicles. For solid minerals, if a machine is used to dig, the emissions from that machine. Scope 2 are indirect. These are usually upstream when they purchase electricity for their offices. And scope 3 is when a product is then later used. So for oil and gas, when you put it in your car, drive, the emissions from your car, emissions from airplanes, or coal, when coal is burned for electricity, those would be scope 3. And one interesting thing is that a lot of these industries can overlap. For example, for coal, for a coal mining company, their biggest emissions would be scope 3 when the product is burned for use for electricity. But for a power plant, that would be their scope 1 emissions, because that's them, their direct emissions that they generate. So I only bring that up because multiple industries can be addressing the same emissions. And the way they have the scopes defined, it can be addressed from different angles from multiple industries. So going back to this definition again, I just point this out because a company and what they're pursuing is very different based on the language that they are using. So a company that's oil and gas or coal mining that has goals for scope 1 and 2, if they are net zero or carbon neutral, that is very different than a company that is trying to achieve it for scope 3, because majority of emissions are in that scope 3 category. So you really have to look at the way a company phrases their pledge to see what they're trying to address. So what are operators doing today? This is just staff looked into what our current lessees are doing for both industries. And for oil and gas, we have 70 payers roughly, and 5 of them have our greenhouse gas reduction pledges. So we only have 5, but those 5 make up roughly 80% of the revenue that the land board's receiving. We currently only have 1 operator that is pursuing scope 3. And we did have 1 operator who was carbon neutral for scopes 1 and 2. They've been operating that way the last couple of years. That was Civitas. However, they were just recently acquired by SM Energy, and they are currently figuring out their goals moving forward. But for the last few years, we did have an operator that's been operating scopes 1 and 2 carbon neutral.
And who's pursuing scope 3?
Oxy, Occidental Petroleum. And then on the solid mineral side, we have roughly 55 payers, and 6 of them have net zero pledges. Those 6 make up 96% of the state land board's revenue, and coal is slated to stop by 2028. I know there's been some talk in the newspapers on whether that's actually occurring. I'm going to stay optimistic that that is happening, but we're watching that closely to see. Yes.
What constitutes our solid minerals? Is it mostly sand and gravel, as an example?
Sand and gravel, hard rock mining, gold, uranium, any sort of basically non-oil and gas mineral.
Coal.
Yeah, coal. Yeah, it's cool. And then GCC is one of the largest emitters in the solid mineral portfolio, the cement manufacturer. They have a goal to be net zero by 2050, which is in line with the Paris Agreement. So when I go through these strategies, they basically overlap between oil and gas and solid minerals. I think these strategies could be applied to either arena. So current things, what is the land board doing right now? I think we're not necessarily resting on our laurels. We have had a lot of collaboration with DNR and their efforts. We collaborate routinely with these regulatory agencies when they're writing regulations. The Colorado Energy Office, we're in collaboration with them on their grant programs and making sure that our lessees are aware of these if they're related to greenhouse gas reduction efforts. And for the 2 roadmaps that were created, we had input in those as well. And then there are biweekly interagency carbon management meetings that staff has been attending with other representatives of DNR, where we all talk about different strategies that companies or agencies are pursuing for greenhouse gas reduction. In terms of carbon management, we also are really pushing our renewable energy portfolio, carbon sequestration. We're trying to start that line of business, geothermal. We're hoping we issue our RFP here shortly. And we have our grassland carbon program, which is also growing. We also have been monitoring the carbon market and the MRV standards. MRV stands for measuring, reporting, and verification. Right now, there's not a universal standard that says this is how you measure and report carbon. And I think once that officially happens, I think that might make some of these industries grow faster, and it'll be easier to monitor and verify. So we're monitoring that. We're always attending lunch and learns where we learn about greenhouse gas reduction mining technologies and considering whether we should implement those. We're tracking our lessees' greenhouse gas reduction efforts and their pledges. And then I think in our current strategic plan, I have investment strategizing. Our current strategic plan talks about trying to change how we are investing and defining minerals in the revenue that's generated from not defining minerals, but the revenue generated from minerals and allocated a bit differently. And so that's a conversation I think that will possibly continue into the next strategic plan. So there's things that the board and staff have been doing. And these are three challenges that I kind of want to walk through before we dive into these strategies, because in the end, what I'm asking for today is if the board likes any of the strategies I bring up, I'm hoping that you advise staff to look into it further. None of these strategies are something that we can just implement tomorrow. These are strategies that we can research because we will have to address these three challenges first to be able to implement anything. And so it's very nuanced, and I wanted to walk through really quick. But first, quantifying impacts and costs. There's no measuring tool for the lost value to trust lands from greenhouse gases. So I think it makes it hard because there's not a formula that says this many greenhouse gases equals this much less rainfall and therefore $100,000 loss to our ag portfolio. It's a little unquantifiable, so that makes it harder. The global issue, even if we were to reduce emissions entirely on trust lands, we're not going to be impacting demand. And demand for mining. So mining would likely continue on neighboring properties, and that would still generate the emissions that are impacting trust lands. So we really have to show that whatever policy we put in place has a direct impact to help our trust lands, which is hard since it's global. And then the fiduciary duty, again, we have to have actions that directly support trust lands and tying it to that economic long-term productivity. So I know that sounds bleak, but I do think there are ways we can potentially move forward. These are things that we would have to address before implementation of anything. So going back to the overview, now we can dive into the strategies. I plan on going through the pros and cons of them all, and we can come back to any of the ones the board wants to talk about further, or stop me at any time, whatever you prefer. So the first one I looked into was whether the board should require a greenhouse gas or carbon reduction pledge to lease with the land board. So you could really put in whatever you want here, but it could be greenhouse gas or carbon reduction pledge. The pros of this are it's broader than net zero. As we discussed, net zero is a pretty strict standard. Having just some sort of reduction pledge broadens that door and isn't specifically net zero. This pushes the baseline monitoring. Right now, a lot of companies are not monitoring at all how many emissions they generate. And so this would start to push a company to start monitoring. They'd have to come up with a plan and look at results. And it could push operators into a pledge that might otherwise not. So the challenges or the cons, we have to look at those challenges again of tying this directly to the long-term productivity of trust lands. This would limit our market. As we talked about, there's 5 oil and gas operators and 6 solid mineral operators that have pledges right now. So that would substantially reduce the market that we have today, which would in turn, yes, go ahead.
Can you characterize those that have some sort of commitment versus the operators that have not? I mean, are they small independents as compared to global multinational big companies?
I think what we're seeing overall is that a lot of the large companies that are global have commitment. And that's why it reflects like that's majority of our revenue, because those companies do a lot of drilling, and the larger companies have some sort of carbon reduction, or not carbon, but greenhouse gas reduction pledge. Whereas these smaller, more mom and pop type places do not. And in solid minerals in particular, we lease to counties, municipalities, things of that nature. They don't typically have any sort of carbon reduction pledge or greenhouse gas reduction pledge.
So, Crystal, you know, when I read through those strategies, I mean, it's, first of all, I think we ought to definitely be involved with the Paris Accords and things we should do, but I guess as I looked at the strategies, I'd like for you to also address what capability we have to monitor.
Mhm. That's one of the things I'm gonna get to as well. Yeah, one of the cons actually. So, you know, if we have a limited market, that would at auction reduce bonus potential because we have less people bidding. And I have up here a con: false pledges. I think this I worry about. Would operators start making pledges just to lease with us and have no intention of ever actually pursuing it? So we need to have some way of making sure that these pledges are actually done. And enforcement. Right now, the carbon market is very new. The GEM rules are the first enforcement of any sort of carbon standard in Colorado. So CDPHE has set some standards in place and are enforcing it. But in terms of oil and gas or other mining industries, it's not required. Anything being done right now is voluntary. So the state land board would have to step into the enforcement agency role. And so we would have to have staff, we would have to have training, we would need to learn more about how to monitor these sorts of things and enforce it. And then what are their ramifications? So a lot of these pledges are, you know, far out in the future. When we get to the future, if they haven't done anything, they've already been mining for 25 years. So what do we do at that point? We'd have to talk about what are the ramifications if they're not met. So the second strategy I looked at is requiring net zero emissions to lease with the land board. Again, you could sub whatever you want. If you wanted it to say carbon neutral or carbon net zero, we could do a multitude of things. But for this instance, I have net zero. So this would align with the Paris Climate Agreement and actually push it faster because they cannot lease with us until they've reached net zero. And I think a pro is that this requires the pledges completed to lease. And so we're not worrying about those false pledges. Cons, those three challenges we talked about. And this would virtually eliminate the market because right now we don't have any operators on either side that are net zero. So that would reduce bonus and halt expiration. So I'm not sure how familiar, we've talked about the decline curve for oil and gas, but oil and gas wells typically produce the most revenue in the first couple of years. And so in order to continue with royalties and royalty revenue, there has to be continued exploration and drilling and development to keep royalties at a higher rate. So that would also reduce royalties. And then I think if we did something like this, a lot of these goals are for 2050. So when we get to 2050, if these companies are operating net zero and can lease with us, have we missed the market? You know, is oil and gas still going to be a booming industry that we can be leasing for in 2050? I think that's unknown. And so we might have missed our chance to lease. So the third strategy I looked into is offering royalty incentives to operators with greenhouse gas or carbon reduction pledges. I put up a couple examples of what this could look like. Oil and gas operators with scope 1 and 2 net zero pledges receive a 1% royalty reduction, and scope 3 pledges receive a 2% royalty reduction. So we'd really be pushing some of those operators to go for that scope 3 because they get a higher royalty reduction. Or sand and gravel operators with a scope 1 net zero pledge receive a 1% royalty reduction. For sand and gravel, majority of their emissions are in scope 1. So the pros, this incentivizes operators with a financial incentive. It pushes operators to pledge that might not otherwise, promotes that monitoring tracking. This is relatively easy to administer. We could post it on our website and start implementing it. And this one is good because existing lessees would qualify. So it could help the people we're currently leasing. The cons, I think for this one in particular, because we'd have an amount to tie it to, we could specifically figure out if we offer a 1% royalty reduction, there's now a financial number like that could associate to $100,000. So the challenge becomes a little harder because we have to show that the benefit to trust lands is 100,000. There's now an amount to tie it to specifically. So we'd have to look into that. Then we'd have lost trust revenues. And as we talked about, if 80% of our oil and gas operators the revenue that we receive already has a pledge, and if 96% of our solid minerals has a pledge, we are now giving a financial incentive to majority of the people paying us right now. And so they would be getting a financial incentive for a majority of our revenue. We fall into the false pledges again. People could make the pledge just to get this royalty rate reduced, but never do it. And then there's no actual environmental benefit until that future date when the pledge is actually achieved. So 4, reducing royalty rates of existing operators when they achieve certain carbon reduction goals. So it could look like this. I put some examples. Upon reaching a 50% reduction of greenhouse gas from 2026 levels, the lessee will receive a 1% royalty rate reduction. So we come up with some sort of standard, and when they reduce emissions, we give them some sort of rate reduction. Or upon proof of carbon neutrality for scopes 1 and 2, lessee receives a 1% royalty rate reduction. So this can incentivize faster achievement because there's this financial incentive if they attain it. It could free up funds to continue greenhouse gas reduction efforts. So if they achieve the goal, get more funds, maybe they'll apply that to more efforts. And it rewards after the goal is achieved, which is better than the false pledges. And again, it incentivizes our current portfolio of lessees. For the cons, we have the challenges. And again, we now can calculate an exact amount lost. So we need to make sure that we get that same amount or more benefit. We have lost revenues to the trust. And then does it really incentivize? I think for larger operators that have a lot of leases, this could be an incentivizing tool, but a lot of these strategies cost a lot of money. So for the smaller operators that are not pursuing these anyway, even if they got $1,000 incentive, some of these strategies can cost in the millions of dollars. So it might not really incentivize them. And now we're looking at the enforcement burden again of training staff, ensuring that we can monitor and ensure that these goals are being achieved and verifying it. So number 5, we looked at adding more stringent requirements to state land board mining leases that are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This would be an easy implementation. We could put a provision into our leases. We could be more stringent than our regulatory agencies, and we could work with the regulators to identify some of these new technologies that are out that are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions to put in to our leases. The cons here, we've got the 3 challenges. This would reduce the market and loss bonus. So we talk about it could potentially reduce the market because the cost would increase to operate here in Colorado. And Colorado is already one of the, has the strictest regulations and is known as one of the most expensive places to operate specifically for oil and gas. However, Julie Murphy came and spoke to the board previously talking about how they heard that Colorado is so hard to develop. You're going to push everyone away. And ultimately that didn't happen. People still came here. So I am putting up here that it can reduce the market, but we have seen that regulations have been imposed and it didn't push people away. So I've got the curtailing expiration and royalties. And then I think the one thing is that this starts to kind of dip our toes into acting like a regulator. So we'd have to be very clear that we are not the regulating entity. The land board's always lease land and then let a developer figure out how they want to develop it. And now we're starting to say how we want things developed, and we have to monitor and enforce that. So again, staff would need to have training on these different technologies and be able to go on site and determine if they're utilizing it or not. And I have technology evolves, which can date the lease. I think in the past, when the land board has tried to tie certain technologies and leases, that becomes outdated. And then that technology is no longer the newest and best thing. And so the land board now has our lease tied to something that's not the most innovative. So we need to come up with a way to make sure it's always changing with the technology available. So the 6-1 purchasing leak monitoring equipment and hire FTE to routinely inspect for leaks. A couple years ago, you might recall that there was articles talking about methane leaks coming from oil and gas wells. And I really wanted to be able to say there are no leaks on state land board lands. And I wasn't really able to say that. We have data with the ECMC who's monitoring that. But getting that and having readily available access to it is just a little harder. So I thought let's try to do it ourselves so we can make that statement. And that's where this concept came from. But I wanted to put up these 2 articles and point out a couple of things. These are studies from the Environmental Defense Fund, and these 2 articles came out within the last couple of months. But this first one talks about rules that were implemented in 2014 related to methane reduction efforts and putting leak detection equipment on sites. And so they found this 70% methane reduction between 2010 and 2017. And that is largely due to the policies put in place for methane reduction. So for these leak detection equipment. So it's working, the regulations that they're putting in place. And then more recently, in February, these rules applied to all new development that you had to have leak detection equipment. And now they are requiring it for all old wells as well. So stripper wells, any well in Colorado is going to have this leak detection equipment on it. Yes.
So maybe you touched on it.
Mhm.
To what extent does ECMC require methane leak detection?
They do.
do.
They do require it, and now
You say it was previously only on new wells. Now it's being applied
yes.
to old wells. So what does it leave? What parcels or what wells does it leave which do not have required leak detection by ECMC?
So that's the thing. This article just came out within the last couple of weeks where they just approved putting it on the older wells. That's not going to be implemented, I think, until 2027 officially. And so when I was looking into this strategy, a couple of years ago, there was not a requirement on old wells. But I wanted to point out that, we're looking into this, and then ECMC stepped in, and they're doing a lot of these things that we're looking at and regulating this themselves.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you give us any sense of scale of all the production, oil and gas production in Colorado? What percentage is under our jurisdiction?
Oh, we don't.
Of either volume or some scale? Maybe if you don't have it off the
Yeah,
top of your head.
I don't know that, but
Try to research that as we go forward.
okay. We can pull that data, but I don't have that offhand right now.
It'd be interesting to know as a matter of scale. Do we hold 5% or do we hold 50%?
Right.
Whatever.
Yep. So for the leak monitoring equipment, we would be able to know specifically if there's leaks or emissions on our lands. And this would be very beneficial for revenue audits because we need to be paid on all gas that comes out of the ground. And so if there's something that's being vented or escaping, we need to make sure we're paid on it. So in terms of those 3 challenges we discussed, This one ties back to an economic issue. So I think this would be a lot easier to meet the challenge, saying that we are doing this for economic purposes to make sure we're getting paid appropriately. And we could rectify faster fugitive emissions on our lands.
So I'm assuming some wells on our lands currently have this leak monitored.
Yes.
So do we get any of that data?
No, but I do think it's reported to ECMC.
Yeah,
So
I'm
it's
just
like-
curious, like, could we be collecting revenue now?
If we wanna look at this, we pull it from ECMC's website. Sorry, Katie
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's publicly, it's available. I haven't requested it, but for auditing purposes, yeah, it's something that we would want our auditors to request.
I mean, it feels like if they're collecting that data, we don't have to duplicate what they're already doing and will be doing. It sounds like.
Exactly. So I've got those cons here. Looks like we've kind of discussed this a little bit. And now for the strategy number 7, there's this thought of creating some sort of trust land greenhouse gas mitigation fee structure. Examples of what this could look like. There could be, when an operator leases with the land board, they pay upfront some sort of lump sum, $5,000, $10,000 that would go into this mitigation program. And we could make it where that money's kept forever, or if they show certain mitigation practices, they might get the money refunded back to them. So it would try to incentivize them to do these practices to get that money back. The other option would be some sort of annual nominal, non-refundable fee. You know, you're paying $1,000 a year for the life of your lease. That will go into a similar account to be used for greenhouse gas mitigation projects on trust lands. So the pros here, this could generate money for greenhouse gas reduction projects on trust lands. They could be aimed specifically for trust lands and the impact to trust lands. And then the cons, the challenges, I think the staffing and resources is big here because we'd have to have someone monitoring the money coming in and then trying to figure out what those projects would be and then implementing the projects on trust lands. There's account considerations. I think statutorily, we have to look at how do we even collect a fee like this and make an account that's separate from the way we treat trust funds right now. So we might have to look into that. I think it does make the lease less marketable for increasing costs. And I think the funds would be very limited until that fund builds up. So I don't know how long that would take, but that could be a few years before we have enough money to actually implement any projects. And then what type of projects would staff pursue? So if there's, if we're trying to pursue a project to plant trees to reduce emissions, does that now impact an existing lease on our land, like an agricultural lease? We'd have to look at, is planting a bunch of trees compatible with existing uses and what type of projects can we do to help trust land? So that all would need to be looked into. So with that, I'm back to our first question on talking with the board about whether there are any strategies that were presented here or any strategies you have to see if there's anything you want staff to research further or try to investigate.
It just seems when we've had problems with operators in the past, it's been the small ones by and large. I don't know that it's a strategy, but could there be where if they have these goals that we want to see, and I know it's the large operators, could we give them bonus points when we award a lease, for example? So we're tilting the scales a little bit towards them, but it's recognizing that they do have these climate goals that they're working to. Net zero is a long ways off. We work with a ton of companies with net zero goals. All of them are 2050 by and large. So I'm not sure that makes a ton of sense for us. But we want to recognize that, and they're monitoring people who have climate goals, like the big operators and other companies. They actually produce reports on their progress. They're monitoring that. So I don't think we would have to worry about whether or not they're doing like a false reporting, or, they're saying they're doing it and they're not. But can we recognize that they're actually doing that and give them a leg up on potentially other folks who might be awarded a lease, because we want them to be the people who are leasing from us? There might be a different incentive than that, than, just a royalty payment kind of thing, because they're going to pursue those goals with or without a royalty incentive.
I'm thinking about, I'm just talking out loud about how something like that would work, but like, since we put all of our land up for auction, maybe there's like a first auction of the companies with pledges. If attracted like at least, it goes then to, something.
I'm spitballing with you, but you know what I'm saying, and it attracts a different kind of operator, which I think would be my preference, is those folks who already are doing these kind of best practice sort of things and reporting out on them.
A softening of requiring it. It's more encouraging it, and
Or we're actually saying, if you are doing these things, we're going to recognize that by giving you a leg up in our leasing auctions.
yeah,
A preference.
not a reduced royalty or anything like that. just a
No,
preference.
because I think they're going to bid anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we need to incentivize them with money, just to be honest with you. But there might be a way to get more of them. I don't know, maybe they already win our auction, so it may be a moot point.
80% do.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Harvey has had his hand up.
Yeah, well, thanks, Crystal, for doing this work. I think it's really important. With all this atmospheric stuff, it's really hard to prove an economic win, since it's we're all sharing the same atmosphere with China and India and the rest of the country. It's the typical tragedy of the commons. I wonder if it's worth consulting with other state land or state boards that have a lot of oil and gas leases, chatting with them and see if we can do this in blocks of states, so it doesn't make Colorado less attractive. The incentive's still there if all the really oil and gas rich states moved in tandem. And I'm sure someone would resist it, but maybe it would take some sort of economist to figure out what the sensitivity is or elasticity with these oil and gas companies to see, where it's competitive, where it's not competitive. But New Mexico, Utah, certainly Wyoming, they all do so much oil and gas, and I don't know what their what their state land boards look like. But if whichever one of these options that Crystal presented, if we chose one and got other land boards to come aboard with the same ideas, same regulations, whatever it is, even though we still can't prove how much money the country or the world saved economically, it would still seem like a bigger splash, a bigger effect.
I think that's a great idea. I just a side note, at a lot of these NASTL conferences, the National Association of State Trust Lands, we have roundtables, and we just started implementing roundtables with these other land boards regarding oil and gas lease management. We're doing the solid mineral one in another month. I brought this topic up before, and even like stipulations. What kind of wildlife stipulations do you put on? And what are you doing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? And I don't want to say I get laughed out of the room, but it doesn't seem to be a focus. A lot of them, New Mexico last fiscal year did 2.3 billion in royalties on oil and gas. And so this is such a huge moneymaker for them. None of them are wanting to restrict it. But I do think that is definitely something we can talk about in these meetings and see what traction we can get.
Katie's got.
Yes, nice, Katie.
I guess I would just add to New Mexico in particular, their lease is defined in statute. So their legislature would have to make changes to their lease. And
Mhm.
there's a couple other states that I think are in similar boats. So we have a little bit more flexibility with our lease than other states do. But that might be worth looking at once we have all that data. Crystal has put together a spreadsheet to develop like which states have statutorily defined leases versus the states that might be able to have some flexibility, and we could have conversations like that with those states. But they may not be the big oil and gas states.
I was just I'm following on Mark's question. What states are oil and gas producing states who have land boards?
We talk with Texas a lot. And Oklahoma and New Mexico, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Who am I missing?
Utah.
Those are the main-
Alaska came with one of them.
Yeah, Alaska tended, but
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Harvey, I think this is a really good idea, and I think we can look into it more. To add on to what Katie was saying, some of the makeup of these state land boards are like the top three
I know.
offices in the state, so sometimes this becomes more political.
Yeah.
Than anything.
or the governors on
Yeah.
on the board.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if guilt always works. Again, the fiduciary responsibility. In my mind, a lot of it is these school children, in 20 or 30 years, whatever, when they have their own families, they're trying to make a go of it in whatever state they are. And, if we could tie the importance and the responsibility of reducing greenhouse gases to funding schools, reducing greenhouse gases is it's indirect, but it's really a way of funding these kids' futures. It's gonna be easier on them if the climate's a little better. And that's a big lobbying campaign, that's a big communication thing. But maybe there can be some ties to what are we doing? We're trying to help these kids in their future. Sure, we're trying to build, schools and computer programs and all that. But we're also trying to leave them with some sort of future in all these states that's viable. So maybe some really clever communicator can tie those two things together.
Say you might have a case with New Mexico, but the rest don't recognize climate as an issue.
Yeah.
Just to be upfront about it.
Yeah, and that chart, I mean, I would assume a lot of those are the top emitters.
They were, a couple of them were.
Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on Mark's suggestion. Yeah, Mark, to what you're hearing from Crystal and from Chris Smith, it divides pretty quickly and obviously between red states and blue states in terms of their political. I want to suggest, at least speaking for myself, I approach this like a simple risk management question. If there's an abundance of science for now 30 or 40 years on the effects of climate change. And if we don't make every effort almost to the extreme to address it, the results are going to be catastrophic. On the other hand, if even in the face of taking the most aggressive posture on addressing climate change in all arenas of life, in human consumption and in carbon or greenhouse gas reduction, if you can't really err when one potential result in the worst case is the destruction of the globe as we know it, or the ability of human life to be perpetuated as we know it. And the other opposite end of the spectrum is we cost the economy, pick your number, 10% more or 20% more of growth of GDP or something like that. I mean, the scale is pretty obvious. We ought to err on the side of preserving humanity. And that fits very nicely with our obligation in perpetuity to serve school children. Now, we're talking in the extremes here, but that's risk management calculation. That's essentially, it's an insurance question. You know, what strategies can we employ to do our little small part, our 1.85% part that Colorado contributes, and in that global question of preserving the planet. So for me, do as much as you can do any possible conceivable way you can do it, and bring us back the most aggressive menu to discuss and discern. I made some really brief notes, which means that, you know, I like the strategies 4, 5, 6, and 7, but we ought to examine when we refine them the pro and con more closely to understand. I don't think we need to give any sort of significant financial incentives to, you know, global energy companies. But the flip side of that is the smaller independents, which, if to whatever extent are lessors of our oil and gas resources, probably they operate on much smaller margins, and they don't have the resources to be sustained without perhaps some economic incentive. So that's just a declaration of sort of very large picture on my part.
And I have no evidence, but my sense is that, you know, the younger generation is a lot more convinced that the climate really is changing fast. And it's certainly going to affect them far more than older people. So I don't know, maybe there's some value to trying to get Colorado students, and I would sort of think college age or even Colorado kids just entering their career path to be on our side with this, to help lobby in that direction.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can absolutely be a leader in this. And Commissioner Pribble, I think we recognize that there is a cost to how we make our money, and I would love to sort of drill into some of these specific ideas or other specific ideas, because a lot of these things will take a lot more research. These, as Crystal mentioned, these aren't things that we can implement today. We need to figure out sort of the feasibility of them, both within our fiduciary duty, within legislative things like that. But we can, getting specific feedback from you on certain ideas, we can move forward with them. We can talk with our sister agencies like ECMC about regulations. We can talk with the executive director's office, and we can start to move these forward to really get you a menu of the most feasible ideas to drill down further. So I would love to go more in the weeds.
That'd be great. I'm, by the way, reminded that it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it was a conservative politician. Josie, help me out on this.
Where are you going?
Or maybe it was a conservative justice on the Supreme Court that coined that famous phrase about the states being the laboratory of democracy.
Right.
So in other words, states are encouraged to experiment with different strategies and bold ideas to solve big problems. And so let's be one of those states.
And Commissioner Pribble, I think what I'm hearing from you is you prefer this. I break it down into carrot and stick. Just maybe those aren't the right terms, but kind of the stick approach. The more requiring it rather than incentivizing it.
Well, I think it's too early to tell. I think I think that on one hand, if the lessor is a global energy company, the Chevrons, the ConocoPhillips, the BPs of the globe, You know, what little economic incentive we offer them is they've got much greater constituencies they're serving than us. But there is an argument to be made to incentivize, to me, the smaller independent operator, and who may well be Colorado based as well, or regionally based as well. And that's, you know, that's a little bit of local bias. But I think
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's a mix of both incentives and penalties or restrictions. It's going to be fascinating to hear the pushback, no doubt, which there will be. But again, the alternative for future generations, on one hand, could be catastrophic.
Crystal, I'm not sure I understood. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The difference between number 3 and number 4 of those ideas.
Let me go back.
Yeah,
Okay.
one is with pledges and one is.
Yeah, so this
So
one is just a pledge. So
Oh, okay.
royalty incentive if they make a pledge of some sort. And
And
this
the other
one
one was,
when they actually achieve the goal.
okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Pribble, I think it was Louis Brandeis who said
Yes.
states, yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Commissioner Heath?
Well, I'm thinking this would be a useful conversation to have in partnership with ECMC.
Yeah.
To say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we're thinking about this, but what sort of things are you all thinking about and would be the easiest to implement?" I mean, I feel like they've got such expertise in this area,
Yeah.
and while we certainly are interested, I feel like I'd like to learn more about
Great
that.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I was monitoring is that in the greenhouse gas reduction roadmap, there is a specific goal that the ECMC was going to be researching how to promote leasing with operators pursuing greenhouse gas reduction strategies.
Mhm.
And so that was had a deadline for 2025. And so I was monitoring that closely to see what they
Mhm.
decide to implement so we could maybe piggyback, but they have not gotten to that goal yet. So
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was gonna echo both. I think what all of my fellow commissioners are saying. I'm with Jim. I don't think incentivizing multinational companies makes any sense to me. I don't mind giving them preference because it's recognizing they're doing this. And then I also, ECMC, we were part of, we did part of the greenhouse gas roadmap. So I'm super familiar with that document. And there's tons of great ideas in there. And I don't think we need to assume the role of regulator. I think that's a weird crossing of the lines for me, with sister agencies who are both staffed up to do it, have the technical expertise, and frankly, have the
Expected for it.
resources.
And are expected to do
And
it.
yeah, but there's ways we could partner with them so that we can have our needs met in order to realize what we want to see happen. So I think we're on the right track where we want to recognize the right kind of lessees and get them to be the folks that are leasing our lands from us. And I'm following what Mark and Jim are saying. You know, we have to, this is a priority. And if it ends up we can't have small operators because they cannot follow these kinds of standards we want, I can live with that, to be honest with you. And it means our market gets smaller. I can live with that too, so that we are doing this in the very best practice ways that we can with the fewest emissions possible, as long as we're in this business or however long we're in this business. And maybe that's the price we pay. And that's okay by me. You know, those are conversations we'll have to have. But if it reduces our footprint because we're saying we're not going to accept less than that threshold, then that is a choice that we're making as a collective. And we're going to have to make some trade-offs with that. So maybe we don't lease everything because we can't get the right kind of operator to take on and practice the way we want to see this happen. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a savings to the trust in the sense that those are the operators that take a lot of time.
They take time, and frankly, for my tenure on this board, that's who's caused us headaches. That's who we have to
It leaves a
deal,
mess.
who leaves a mess. And I'm kind of over that. And I get the small mom and pop people can't do this, but maybe then that isn't who we want. So I'm just putting it out there as a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think we'll have to nuance that a little bit more between
Yeah.
private sector and public sector, because some of them are counties with, gravel pits for their road department.
Yeah. I get
but we could
that.
do-
I am, by the way, just spitballing, but I'm
No,
putting
I
it
know.
out there that we've had trouble in the past, and it's the bad apples that kind of really are problematic for a sector that frankly still funds a lot of our work. And so if we don't have to engage in that way anymore, it's a trade-off.
Can I say back to you to all the commissioners, sort of some of the notes that I've taken down, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one, kind of focus on our niche, like if other people or the regulators or other people are doing things that affect our lessees on our land, we don't have to double up on that. Two, focus on maybe the smaller operators, because they seem to be the ones that haven't made the carbon pledges. And three, the kind of the stick versus carrot approach, more of a requirements, but more stipulate. I mean, I could see this in the form of more stipulations in our lease, things like that. Am I hearing that correctly? And are all the commissioners?
Yeah, and it may mean a
Yeah.
phase out over time to, we move towards people who do have those carbon pledges and that are being tracked through their accounting, all of the greenhouse accounting things that they are held accountable to as a company. And those are real accounting things, and that we are not going to track, by the way. They're very complicated, but that's a real system that they're accounting to.
Well,
Very much.
and we could make this measurable by, percentage of our lessees that have certain pledges, and not percentage of number of lessees, but percentage of our acreage that's leased.
Exactly.
Things like
And it
what
may
you said.
mean it's a smaller percentage over time, but maybe that's okay.
I'm going to circle back to this idea about having real conversations with ECMC, not just checking, do you do this or do you
Right.
not? But really letting them know that this is a real interest of ours, and what do they think is the most practical and best opportunity. And because I feel like this is more in their bailiwick. I mean, our making clear that this is our intention is one thing, but I feel like we could learn a lot. And I want to really start there, because I feel like this is a huge undertaking. And then second, I just have to weigh in to say that I think it's worth at least having conversations. Most counties, or many counties, have their own sand and gravel operation. And so I don't want them to feel like, oh wait, we're already going after them. The reality is, I think it'd be worth saying to them, what would make this more viable for you to do? And listen to them about what options they think might be helpful.
I think those are two great ideas and suggestions, and I particularly think we need, if as we create a plan to address that's both effective and efficient, working with others whose role it is to understand and stretch for the objectives for the state. They're already stretching and brainstorming on probably a lot of the different things that we've been talking about. So I absolutely support that. That's the goal. I guess for
I have one last suggestion
Please.
before you move on. It might be worthy of a conversation. EDF is super active in this space, and get their thoughts and input into what maybe we could do as a land board.
That's another good one, because these conservation organizations over the last 20 years have have really undertaken things from a market perspective as well. So they understand that flailing around
like
looking for solutions that aren't going to be adopted by the market
Right.
at all are fruitless.
And
So-
they best practice, they'll work with companies on what can be implemented, work with markets, and they do policy work.
Mhm.
So it might be worthy of a conversation.
I think that's another great idea.
Yeah.
And I guess the final thing I
Also-
would say, and I want to make this practical for how you proceed, but I think an easy thing for us to do would begin already acknowledging people who are doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, we can just give credit to them, which for large global folks, that's a feather in their cap that the Light Board is giving credit to them. for whatever. So I just want to put that on the list, but
Yeah.
that's more superfluous
Yeah.
than really looking at what we think are viable strategies. But I guess what I would just say overall, I think I hear, uniformity and our desire as commissioners to have this as a part of our strategic thinking as well as the actual plan.
Yes, and I have some
Okay.
caveats to that, but I'd like Commissioner Harvey to go forward.
Oh, sorry. Also Western Resource Advocates, they do great work on this stuff, and NRDC, obviously. But WRA, in my opinion, does some great work on this stuff.
Yeah, I like that idea of, again, let's work with the experts. We don't have to
Yeah.
reinvent
We
this
don't,
stuff.
and nor do we have, yeah, exactly, yes.
Yeah, and we don't want to switch roles. I think that the commissioners have pretty much said, we don't want to ease into a space of being a regulator, and that in a lot of what potential strategies, we
Yeah.
looked at that.
You
And as
mentioned you
we,
had some concerns though.
oh, well, I was just, more just some add-on in proceeding with this is we, as the staff moves it forward and we talk with partners, that will help too. But I want to make sure that if we're using carrots, for example, and we're spending money by reducing royalties or whatever, we're actually really getting something that we can document and record as a value. And a lot of this is very squishy. They make a plan. I'd encourage us to really think about, the one about we give them a break if they achieve their goals. I mean, the goals are also probably going to keep changing, and this is just a really messy space that'll soak up a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
So I would like to caution us about being really effective. I mean, really thinking about what are we trying to accomplish? Is it real? What's it look like? And how will we know that we have changed the trajectory of anything? The second
Yeah.
part of what I was going to add was these are, and rightly so, about how we might be able to influence third parties, our lessees. There's another piece of this that we should also examine that I think is consistent, particularly with some of the comments that Commissioner Pribble and Commissioner Harvey have said, which is what might we do to show the world the importance and to in fact walk the talk? And by that I mean changing the accounting of the mineral revenues, putting the mineral revenues in a climate adaptation fund that might be climate investments we have to make in our portfolio, or it might be a way of augmenting how we buy certain land or water assets to mitigate the impact, or it might be a factor in easing us into trades. Might be the way we get policy that allows us to have more flexibility in changing the lands in our portfolio. So I'd like to not limit us to just the third parties out there, and also what we can do by calling it what it is, calling out the negative externalities in how we look at and characterize that revenue, and setting some aside for ourselves to address the impacts of climate change. So I don't know if you all have any thoughts and feedback on that part.
Mark's got his hand up.
Yeah, I second that. I think that was really well put. And Colorado's already a leader with a lot of this stuff, but let's keep stepping out further. And I don't know how you we don't really have a marketing arm yet, do we? But it would be great to tie the two things together. Again, the future of these school kids and what we're trying to do with climate mitigation. So I think the chair put it really well, and I support what she just said.
And
Thank you, Mark.
let me just beat this to death, but as we think in the future about land acquisition, it gives us a framework for how we consider nominations that come to us.
Mhm.
And they fit certain criteria that we have. It might be critical wildlife corridors. It might be places that are more appropriate for alternative energy. It might be certain ecological things that we're trying to preserve. It's because I know when you get nominations, it's just all over the place. And it would help us, I think, if we could set out some of the things that we intend to achieve that reward our climate.
Right, on the land side, nominations for land, or not nomination, but really our selection of lands
Right.
that we might want to acquire.
Right.
And I think, I don't know, it started to come up in several of the potential acquisitions, but the climate impact of really understanding on any potential acquisition, what is going to be the expectation of the climate impacts over
Mhm.
30, 60, 100 years.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to already do that, but yes, I agree. Any
I guess
other thoughts?
Probably ought to circle back and say, those folks who will now need to take this and figure out how they run with it, does it feel like there's enough clarity here?
Okay.
Yeah, I have about 3 pages of notes here. And yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff in there. My brain is kind of sorting them now into different buckets. So yeah, I think there's a lot here, and I really appreciate the commissioner's input on this. And this is a long, this is a spectrum, and this is kind of a certain spot in the spectrum. If commissioners have other ideas in the future, please bring them to us. We would love to hear more and to look further into other ideas as well.
We have a project looking at scope 4. It is incredibly technical.
Wow.
I sit in on it, and I'm like, it's accounting. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's moving. The point being, it is moving constantly.
Yeah.
So trying to keep up with this and thinking somehow we can be experts, we should not try that.
Okay.
Because even what is a plan today won't be a plan
Won't be.
tomorrow. The
It
measures are going to
absolutely
be
will
different.
not be. And
Yeah.
that's with WRI, World Resources
Yes, that's the
Institute, who did scope 3.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we are not these big giant NGOs who are like all over this stuff, which is why we should consult people. Who knows?
Exactly. We'll add WRI to the list too, just not so much that we're going to partner with them, but they do have a ton of really interesting things.
And we have good relationships with, not only, I know John Golden Dubois, I'm sure Mark does too, but I can help you with NRDC, certainly.
Mhm.
We knew people at EDF. I'm sure you know EDF.
I know more on the ag side.
I know
That's more the
energy.
climate side.
So yeah, I can help you with some energy folks.
It looks like Mr. Teschner's
Ben has a
teed
clarify.
up for something.
Ben Teschner, Solid Minerals Manager. The board, I'm hearing the board talking a lot about external experts, which sounds fantastic. And we seem to be kind of dancing around something. So I want to ask a specific question. How much would you like us to bring those external experts to you in presentations like this and workshops, stuff like that as part of this process?
I think you should talk to them, and then if they have some great ideas that bring forward, we'd love to hear from them.
Great.
But do some interviewing.
And I'm hearing not just our regulatory agencies within our state, but perhaps a little more broadly than that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Looking at.
yeah.
Definitely.
NGO community.
Truth
Yeah.
is, most of the movement that's happened within governmental entities has come from external organizations that have just continued
Yeah.
to push.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the clarity.
I mean, EDF wrote the methane rule for Colorado
Right.
in like 2014. That was adopted into law. I mean,
Well, and I wonder too, the US Climate Alliance is
Yeah,
I don't know who gets to go to that. I mean, it's obviously driven by the governors. But that might be an interesting forum too. There
Mhm.
obviously, as there's a vacuum left by the revocation of the endangerment finding, then I've got to believe that's a pretty active group or conversation
Mhm.
right now anyway.
well, and we know TNC in DC, but Carlos here would be helpful.
Mhm.
I'm sure you all connect with him.
Is the board also, I heard at one point about like not wanting to waste time and resources if something can't ultimately be done. I was thinking about too getting clarification because I've thought about these challenges that I talked about, but I've not asked the AG's office to really look into it or explain to me more what our parameters are. So I would love direction there too, just to kind of see when we're talking to all these parties, like what is feasible.
I think you should get some better clarity, maybe from some external partners on some ideas
Yeah.
before we, because
Yeah.
otherwise we don't even know exactly what we're
Yeah.
asking the AG to weigh in on.
Okay.
We know we don't really want to be regulators, but we want to partner with our regulators
Yeah.
potentially. But I think we need some
More
ideas about,
direction and then.
yeah, where we as a land board and an agency might be able to have, I think we want to see impact, right? We want
Yeah.
to do all this so we have something we can point to making a difference. And what is that? Where will we see a potential for that?
I'll
And-
just add, Chris Agler for the record, Assistant Attorney General, and yeah, we are certainly prepared to play the role that we need to play in this at the appropriate point. And it's helpful, they're investigating which strategies you'd like staff to investigate at this point, and then our role would then be, looking at that and determining, confirming it's consistent with the land board's fiduciary duty and constitutional and statutory duties. And then that would be our role. So we're
But
ready
it's
to
more
do that.
important to not focus on the limitations.
Yeah, it's the
Before we come up with
opportunities.
the ideas that we would evaluate for impact, and then we can figure out workarounds or considerations.
And overlaying the greenhouse gas roadmap with us, I think is kind of
Mhm.
helpful with DCMC and their
Mhm.
thinking.
Oh, yes, Director.
So Director Rosemarino, I wonder, given what I'm hearing, if we're coalesced around researching further number 4 through 7, or if we can look at the whole menu,
Yeah,
engage these external parties,
yes,
and I really appreciate, your leadership here, Crystal, and thank you, Ben. I know you've helped shape this. I think the expertise here is getting a lay of the land and where we might have leverage, and reflecting on what GHG pledges.
Mhm.
Most of our revenue can be traced to in both oil and gas and solid minerals. So thank you for all the wonderful work you've done. I think what you're hearing from the board is enthusiasm for digging even deeper, but just want to know if we could increase the bandwidth for what Crystal's looking at to include all of these 7 strategies to explore them further and maybe come up with new ones.
Yeah, I would just caution that, like 6, I think, didn't we sort of agree leak monitoring equipment? It seems like somebody's already doing that. and it's
Right,
Progressing. I don't feel like we need to look at that. Updating is fine, but I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time.
Well, we're going to be talking with ECMC, so we can check in
Yeah,
and see.
You can
if there's
check in, but I mean,
complementary roles.
it's something that, didn't seem like it rose to the top.
Right. So wide open on this in terms of further inquiry.
Yeah.
Excellent.
no, great work.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into it. Excellent. Anyone have any other questions, comments?
Mm.
No, okay. Well, then, thank you, Crystal and Ben. And I guess we're now gonna move
Maybe
into.
this is a naive question, but does our staff like sit down with staff for ECMC and just talk about, sort of ideas that might be possible?
Yeah, I meet with Julie Murphy with ECMC at least once a month. I actually met with her yesterday as part of a bigger group, and I would say a lot of those conversations are around what's going on and not necessarily sort of
go.
brainstorming, but
Yeah.
I think we can start
Just,
those.
you know, even putting out some of these and saying to them, what would make the biggest impact? And you think some more doable.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I like that idea. There's certainly an open line of communication to start that conversation.
Commissioner Heath, we're also, not just Crystal and I, but other people, including Mindy and James, are part of the interagency carbon management group.
Great.
That is spread across all of our agencies here within, or all potentially relevant agencies within state government. And that group meets once a month?
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
Maybe.
And so that's a kind of a constantly flowing space. And, you know, when things come up in that group around, well, hey, maybe we could do this on the land front. We are frequently engaged in those types of conversations.
Yeah, that group includes CDPHE.
CDPHE,
Energy Office.
the energy office, and yeah, all kinds of.
But the difference that we bring of all those groups you've mentioned is that we've got the land.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and everybody is aware of that, believe me.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you know, at one stage, for example, you know, there was somebody was looking at, well, where could we do you know, industrial building decarbonization projects, and we explored that. We brought that over to Julie, and they kind of explored that. It didn't seem like we had an appropriate facility for that, but those types of conversations are happening pretty regularly. Actually, well, every 2 weeks.
Well, thanks for bringing it to us and giving us an opportunity to share some ideas.
I'm just curious, I'm just kind of wildly thinking, under the old time Inflation Reduction Act, were there climate strategies embedded for Forest Service or BLM? That might be something we could look at for how they were gonna manage.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, my
As
my
mandate
familiarity
increase?
with the Inflation Reduction Act was a lot of the tax credits and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I can look further.
I was
into it.
just curious if they had thoughts, because they obviously did the oil and gas leasing on,
Yeah.
not that they
The
happen,
carbon
but I'm
tax
just,
credits still live on.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was extended through the
Yeah,
fire.
and increased.
I was just looking for ideas.
No, I like it.
And all right, vet ideas.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, thank you.
And now we just have a wee little bit left. Is everybody good working through the last part of this?
Mhm.
Alrighty. Then let's move to our information items. The staff report, which was quite meaty this month, and yes, you've got a lot, Director, to share with us.
Thanks, Chair for Mrs. Director Nicole
Yep.
Rosarino. I did want to highlight the, as you said, very robust compilation of staff activities. In terms of the staff leasing report, there were 79 lease actions, and that generated $3.68 million. And the leader there, David Rodenberg, the towers.
Yeah.
A single lease coming in at $1.16 million. And then ag was number 2 at $1.5 million. And I also want to point out, David produced strong showings in wind and solar leases. So really well done, David and all staff. It's a lot of work, and staff's working diligently all the time. It's the backstory behind those numbers. So the second item I wanted to highlight was the really robust agricultural outreach going on. We have the grazing forum, forums that I mentioned that we held in January. And I wanted to point out that every respondent to the survey would recommend the forum to a colleague or friend. That's pretty outstanding. And just, I think, you know, indicative of the quality of the information we're providing to encourage regenerative agricultural practices. So amazing results there, a farming forum to bring that kind of thinking to the cropland context, and also engagement with Colorado Agricultural Forum, which Commissioner Heath attended. So thank you for representing the board there. The next item I wanted to highlight were roundtables convened by our minerals director, who you just heard from, Crystal Coranda. This is really showing great leadership by Colorado and the National Association of State Trust Land. It's really a spinoff from the conference that we held in July of last year. But that convening was to discuss amongst the states with state land boards the potential for royalty changes in oil and gas royalties to maximize benefits for the beneficiaries. And so really well done. And Crystal is, I know, organizing a series of those. So excellent leadership by Crystal in Colorado. Next, I wanted to mention, and we talked about this a little at the county roundtable, the agrivoltaics conference that we sponsored, and we dispatched quite a team to attend and really generated a lot of interest in standing up an agrivoltaics project on state trust land. We have gotten inquiries from industry folks as well as from universities about doing this in such a way that we're both establishing agrivoltaic projects on the land and learning from them. So hopefully we can refine and model and replicate. So that was a really intriguing conference, very well attended and exciting to us. And then I wanted to also highlight the work going on to bring to you the communications with counties and municipalities. And so here we have Pickton County and Norwood. We'll continue this practice of making sure you know when we're in contact with county and municipal governments about different issues. And so I think that's good for your edification, but also for the publics and particularly the local governments involved. And Elliot Hoyt in particular deserves a shout out. Elliot does a lot of wonderful work to engage local governments continually. And that is it for the staff report, at least my highlights of it.
I have a question to follow up on the egg voltaics. I think we were all pretty excited about that. Gosh, it's now been over a year since we went out and investigated. And I thought I read, I'm trying to find on the leasing, we did have there's a planning lease for solar, another big solar. I'm wondering, are we able to kind of start to experiment as they're in their planning? Is that what we're doing, hopefully actively?
Yeah, I can kind of tell you what we're thinking about. The major roadblock that we're finding to agrivoltaics is that the financiers and the insurance companies for the solar developers are having heartburn around. And when I say agrivoltaics, we're looking at like cattle voltaics. Yeah. So I think that's most important to us. And the concern is there's not much research around what happens when you put them together. And so I think that the land board could play a significant role in kind of de-risking that by
demonstrating.
Yeah, demonstrating, exactly. And
That'd
we
be
have
great.
a lot of interest from CSU professors and from NREL to research that and to create the data that could then be used by the industry with their financiers and their insurance companies to further this. I think what really bodes well for this is the combination of the fact that with tracking and solar, you can tabletop the solar for a certain amount of time, and you can quantify the loss of of kilowatts by doing that. And with regenerative grazing, you can use a vents type system
To move them in and out.
to move them in and out. They can be in there for a couple days. They could hit it like they would any other paddock and move out of there. And you can sort of, through research, you can really quantify this, and you can see what damage the cattle would do. And I think a role the board could play is, I think I just mentioned this, but sort of de-risking that through saying, if there is damage to your panels, we'll use IND funds to fix it,
Exactly.
knowing that we can pull the plug pretty quickly
Yeah.
and say the cows are going crazy. Kind of what we heard at the conference from some of the ranchers were, yeah, you know which cow not to put in there. Whereas we know the personalities of our individual cows pretty well. We know which ones to not put in.
Interesting.
And so yeah, we have a lot of interest. Elliot set up a call with a developer that we had 2 weeks ago. We met with the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center last week to discuss further how we can sort of learn and make those connections we need to make. So that's.
I think,
that's
again,
what we're-
we should continue to be a leader in land management, and that is another great use for IND funds is let's leverage the heck out of, we've got time, we've got money, we have less pressure, we can demonstrate this stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's, in the past, we've been looking at raising panels and things like that, and we've just run into economic barriers like crazy. I mean, the every foot you go higher with steel, you got to go a foot deeper, and then you're hiring scissor lifts to install them per OSHA standards. It just goes on, and we're thinking maybe we're just overthinking this.
Yeah. Maybe just put the cows in and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Any questions about that, anyone?
No, I think that's really something we should move forward on as soon as we can.
Yeah.
I had one other question.
Gosh, a couple of years ago, CSU asked us to
Yeah.
think about this.
Yeah, it was almost 2 years.
Yeah,
ago.
that was the second one.
So we were-
I did wonder, and maybe, I don't know who could explain it, but there was a lot of this, just out of personal curiosity, there was a lot of, terminating for monetary fault, but also doing administrative cleanup on all these oil and gas leases. There something that somebody would want to share about, I don't know what that was all about.
Yeah.
Okay. Not trying to extend this meeting, but I did really wonder about that. And it was nice to see a planning lease for wind, Chris.
Yeah.
We haven't had one of those in a
It
while.
has been a while, yeah.
Yeah.
James,
What's, why?
Yeah,
why now?
I'd love to turn it over to James to speak a little bit.
Yeah, James Snickers here, Renewable Energy Program Manager. Yeah, we've just had a couple wind planning leases come into the system. So yeah, really excited to see more wind activity coming through.
Why? What prompted it? Why now, not 6 months ago or 2 years ago or?
Ooh, I can't really speak to that. Sorry.
Stiff breeze.
Yeah.
Put that in the minutes, please.
Yeah. I can't. I don't know a true answer to that. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'd be just curious as you guys are meeting with them and proceeding is like, is there anything happening in the wind industry? Was there a slight change in technology or did somebody find out that the OK wind channel is now better than OK? or
Sure.
something?
Well, certainly there's the Excel infrastructure project on the
Right.
east side of the state. So that's bringing a
Yeah,
lot of transmission
figured
lines.
that
And,
was-
and I think, yeah, we know that hooking up to transmission is really the limiting factor for a lot of renewable energy development, be wind or solar.
Mhm.
So with that project underway, I think we're starting to see a lot of potential from these developers say okay, well, we can plug into this transmission and now
That could
our project
actually
makes
really
sense.
be
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, and I don't know if David's on, but he may be able to shed some light on that as well.
David's on.
Hi, commissioners. I don't really have a good answer other than there's been wind planning leases in the pipeline for some time. It's just taken time to get through them along with solar projects as well. We have about another 4 or 5 planning leases that are going to be executed within the next few weeks or so as well. So you'll see
Wow.
more of those. So they've just been in the pipeline. There's no really reason why now compared to before. There's some companies that have dropped out because they don't have the financial wherewithal to handle the removal of some of the tax credits related to solar. But overall, it's just a timing thing. I don't think there's anything significant on why we're getting more now than before. It's just getting them through the pipeline.
Great, thank you, David.
You bet.
Thank you, James.
Yes.
And Katie, you had a quick response on the last page of the leasing
I
report?
don't know the question.
Oh.
I would just pull it out and take it out. So,
My question was, there was a ton of activity of oil and gas leases on the last page where they were being terminated for monetary default, but then there was administrative change, and I just thought maybe you'd
So there's a bunch of things that kind of culminated towards the end of last year that I've been monitoring. So bankruptcies involving operators, there's legal reasons when we can and cannot take action on those leases. So I've had several that have kind of gotten to the point where I can close the books on those. There's another set of operators who were not in default with us, but chose to abandon some of their assets because they could not meet the regulatory requirements for the ECMC. So I had to wait for ECMC to complete their process to close out operatorship for them so that I would have a reason under the lease to terminate the lease. So there's different requirements depending on the situation. Some of these do take time, which eats up a lot of my monitoring time, but we were able to close up quite a selection of them in the last month. There's probably going to be another tranche of them upcoming, so.
Okay, well, good, now we know, I mean, it's just curious.
Katie's proving my point, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Our prior conversation.
Right, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, on to Nick.
Oh, is it?
Thanks.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Nick Massey, Deputy Director, here to give you a brief update on where we sit with strategic planning. And just organizing here a little bit. So, a quick nod to this really excellent consultant that we've been working with, Government Performance Solutions. Several of us have remarked that they are just leading excellent process. They've been exceptionally effective and efficient in garnering input from a really broad group of stakeholders. To date, 100 voices had their say about their partnership and their work with the State Land Board across focus groups and one-on-ones. I think for the commissioners, you might have been in one-on-ones. There were some focus groups with staff and other partners. Those listening sessions culminated in the themes and insights workshops. One was conducted with staff leadership, one was conducted with you all, and one was conducted with all of staff. And all of that work led to a full day in service that was the beginning of the work of building the plan itself. And I do want to make sure to thank everybody for all the effort that's been put in so far, a lot of time, a lot of great feedback, a lot of heartfelt and honest input in the success of this organization. So on March 2nd, Director Rose Marino, Assistant Directors Hoyt and Smith, Commissioner Frobe, and I met with GPS to transition our efforts from stakeholding to beginning the building of the plan, with the aim of working from some of the excellent history we have as an organization in strategic planning to review and refresh the core components for the new plan. The discussion for that day was anchored in the material produced through the listening sessions that you've already spent time with, including the 9 themes and insights that are common across everybody that gave input, the 5 strategic tensions, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because you've seen these, the 9 guiding principles, which just acknowledges there's been a ton of work behind us already, with a fair bit left to accomplish. So across the work of meshing all that input to a strategic framework, a number of keywords have emerged as things we need to make sure we build from as we look at building the objectives of the organization. Guidance and governance. And again, keywords as in these are important factors as we build out the next phase of the plan. Predictability, stewardship, trust, and not in the sense of being a trust, but building and garnering trust, capacity, influence and credibility, resilience, partnership, public schools, innovation, durability, sustainability, dependability. And then there are a few pieces that traditionally we've held separate space for in our strategic plan that are more likely to play a role this time as cross-cutting tactics that make all things possible and successful. And those were communications and outreach. Communications as a word was said probably 100,000 times over the course of the last many weeks. Data, measurement, and analysis, acknowledging that something we were light on in the existing strategic plan was metrics. Let's work in the ways that we can to point at quantifiable things now. And the strategic partnerships, again, those concepts underlie everything that we're pointing at in strategy moving forward. The Executive Director's Office of DNR and the Governor's Office have asked to be engaged in this planning work. And so we're holding a place for that immediately ahead, based on the framework that we've begun to lay out, based on the components of vision and mission, guiding principles, goals and objectives, and those cross-cutting strategies. And the work ahead. We're now at the point where we've begun to find some alignment in goals language, and we need to start moving to affirm those goals and formulating the projects that carry us through the coming years. So we'll work together as an agency to build additional detail into the projects plan that comes together as a projects roadmap and charter for the projects that we need to undertake. We'll begin to build out the success factors that make those projects work in a detailed action plan that incorporates elements we're familiar with, like our annual business goals process and individual performance management tools, which we've actually just solidified for the current year in DNR's system for managing performance. And we'll conclude the planning with strengthening an accountability framework that helps us succeed across time and changes that happen in the opportunities that are presented to us. And so we'll roll all of that up neatly in a plan document that we promote with our partners and stakeholders as we hold ourselves accountable to its implementation. And before we know it, it'll be time to start planning for the next plan. So that I was given 10 minutes for you, but managed to pull it off in about 4. So I'm leaving plenty of room for questions if you have them about what we're doing with strategic planning. And I may call a friend on a few things depending on the questions.
I would just add, I think the consultants are great, and I've seen my fair share of facilitators.
I bet you have.
Yeah, no, they're really good.
Commissioner Powell?
At what point do you bring it to the full board for debate, discussion, editing?
The timing on that is May, I believe. So we're going to have a May workshop and May board meeting in which we'll present to you as much of the plan as we built out and the framework as we're ready for at that point, and ask for really, hopefully, we hope at that point it's affirmation and approval of what we've heard, because we've built off significant input already. And if there are needs for correction at that point too, of course, we'll entertain those as well. But our hope is to present something very appealing and actionable, and have you find it to be really well done at that point. So maybe it may not need a ton of work is our hope.
Well, excuse me, what does that mean? That we would discuss it in May and also approve it in May?
I think we'd like to get that approval in May, I think is our timing, because we'd like to make sure that we've got it fully ready for July 1 as its kickoff date. But certainly if we find that it needs a lot of work, we'll give it the time it needs, perhaps in June. But yeah, in May, I think we'd ask for a vote to approve it by the board as implementable.
And when would we see that?
In prep for the May meeting, I mean, we would normally put it out in the board packet a week ahead of time, but given the importance of that document, we can think about trying to give you early eyes on it, even ahead of the board packet, and spend the time you need to with it.
I think that would be good.
Sure.
Commissioner Harvey?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Nick and Nicole and Chris and Elliot and anyone else, if you heard any things you didn't expect from other stakeholders, real desirous changes to the board and to how we operate.
I might take a stab at that. Director Rose Marino here. Thanks for that question, Commissioner Harvey. You all got that presentation from GPS in February of their themes and insights. And as we reflected through those, I don't think that there were surprises. I think that there was a lot of convergence with insights we've had as a staff. And I'll give you an example. There was universal recognition that we need more staff capacity to really be diversifying our revenue, to be advancing stewardship on these 2.8 million acres. And so that was, I thought that the results of all that stakeholding were really refreshing in terms of aligning with what we've put our finger on already. I think there were breakthroughs in terms of suggestions for how to do that. I think a lot of sentiments around transparency and the why of what we're doing were clearly articulated, and I think everything was well received. So on balance, Commissioner Harvey, I don't think that there were any sort of shocking revelations, but I think that the stakeholders were very diverse and managed to come together on quite a lot of topics that we've already put our finger on. Another example was stewardship, really broad support for advancing stewardship, and you all discussed that quite a bit at the February workshop. And so in some ways, just a wonderful I think commentary on how probably our extensive communications and outreach with these stakeholders in an ongoing way leads to a lot of convergence and ideas, where we strive to be a very transparent agency. We strive to work in close collaboration with stakeholders as best practice. And I think that themes and insights that the PCS came up with demonstrate that bears fruit. Conducting our business in a way that reflects high standards of governance and transparency.
I think I would add, Commissioner Harvey, I think I would add that, I've been here 9 years, and over the course of my tenure, and I'm looking around the room, and I know there's folks that have been here much longer. As an organization, we've moved through the world in a very particular way. There are times when we've embraced being very much under the radar, and it serves a certain purpose. And was it a surprise? Maybe it's not exactly the right word, but I was very pleased to have a lot of feedback come to us that says, we need to hear more from you. We need to hear more about your story. We need to hear more about the impact that you're making in the world. We're hungry for that. I also was really appreciative of a lot of partners stepping forward to say, let us help you solve problems. Professionally, there's a lot of pride in solving problems by yourself, but there's a lot of impact to be made by surrounding yourself with a really excellent group of partners who can help you solve 10 times the problems you can by yourself. And we have names of organizations now that are saying, here's our phone number, give us a call and let's solve this thing. It wasn't a mystery or invisible to us in the past, but I think, this is the first time in a while we've reached out and said, tell us what you need, tell us what you have, and tell us what you want. And I keep giving kudos to GPS because there's a certain skill in getting people comfortable in saying that about a partner, and they've done it really well.
Thank you.
Great, good questions. Any other thoughts, commissioners? All right, thank you, Nick, and thank you both, Nick and Nicole, for spending the time you have leading this effort on the staff level.
Everybody listening, thanks.
Yeah. All right, I guess wrap up with the
Tours. All right.
good stuff.
This is Director Rosarino reporting out on tours for the year. Very exciting, geographically diverse. The first one is a trip to the southeast part of the state. And April 8th will be a travel day to Lamar. And then early April 9th, the board will tour Alessa Prairie Chicken, Lek, and then hopefully you'll have a little break in between and then conduct your business meeting also in Lamar. So
I know what time we'll be back.
we are aiming to leave Lamar by 3 p.m.
Okay.
So that to allow travel back to.
It's my daughter's birthday. We're having dinner that night in Denver.
Here in Denver.
In Denver.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, okay.
And no roundtable that morning?
There will be a roundtable. Thank you. Yes, there will be an in-person roundtable in Lamar. And then
We just need to make sure that that coffee is loaded, please.
maybe have sugar available.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Great. So then the next trip will be to Jackson County, to the Walden area, June 17th and 18th. The travel to and tour of Sherman Creek Ranch on June 17th. That's the workshop portion. And then the next day to conduct a business meeting in Walden on June 18th. The reason for the tour of Sherman Creek Ranch is that's coming up for a leasing RFP. So want to make sure the board gets to visit and learn more about that property. July, we will be in Montrose. We're traveling to Montrose on July 7th. It's all written down in your board packet. And then tour North Mountain Ranch on July 8th. Improvements on this property will be proposed to the board by staff this year, and then conducting the business meeting in Montrose on July 9th, following an in-person county roundtable.
So it's 7th, 8th.
About time we got to my side of the state.
There you go, Commissioner Harvey. Yes, travel day July 7th, and then July 8th workshop, July 9th roundtable and business meeting. And then
You considered the state plane?
we can consider that, yeah.
I'm just saying.
So you can travel there July 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just whiz into Eagle and pick
Montrose.
you up.
Well, no, I think I'm here,
I
but
think we'll wrap up and we'll be coming back that same day.
On the ninth.
Right. Yeah, probably need to.
I'm just saying, this is where the plane is very, very handy. When you have to, when it's hours and hours.
Yeah, smaller, but you go to the drive.
We'll make that a priority.
Yeah, it's
Doing-
just a
moving as many
suggestion.
people.
It's hard for me to be away from work that long.
Yes, we got it. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, we'll definitely into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you bet. And the idea was travel back that same day, July 9th. So then finally, we are going to a place that you all have expressed a deep desire to see, and that's Lake Fork Ranch. One of our newest acquisitions, that will be the September trip. So we will travel to and tour Lake Fork Ranch on September 9th. And then we'll conduct a roundtable and business meeting in Leadville following day, September 10th. That is the lineup. Hope you like it. I'm looking forward to each of these.
So August in right here.
It will be August. Yes, we'll be in Denver. Yeah.
In May as well.
May will be in Denver. August will be in Denver. Any other questions on that? Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
sounds
just
like
like one day in Denver, just the 12th.
Or we're having a workshop in August.
Or it's 12th and 13th.
Yeah, that's yet to be determined. We definitely for May, we have, we're planning stuff. We're
2
planning
days.
on the 13th being the workshop on the strategic plan. And then the 14th being the business meeting, including the final action item on the strategic plan. But as Deputy Director Massey indicated, if that doesn't work, if y'all don't want to sign off then, we will be flexible.
I'll just put a plug for August. I wouldn't mind one long day.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Unless we need the 2 days.
Chair, is that acceptable?
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. And I think then maybe it could be, we could work around, I think part of the reason we're in August or here in August is for state celebrations or something. So that could be more on a voluntary basis and we could
Okay.
have our business meeting on a long day.
Yeah, would it be the 12th or the 13th, you think?
You all have a preference? If we're gonna go that way?
It's always easier Wednesday,
Wednesday.
because the closer we get
Okay.
to the weekend, the worse I have driving myself.
August 12th
Well,
only in.
If
August.
possible, I don't
That's
mind
fine.
the overnight, it's just, it's two work days.
Let's
You
see-
know what I mean? If
let's
we
see
do
can get
workshop.
consensus.
meeting.
Yeah, it sounds like.
yeah. Commissioner Harvey, does that?
I think that works with me. Yeah.
Long day in August?
Just
Mhm.
see how the agenda plays out. Like I said, I can always make it work. It's just nice if I don't have to miss
Mhm.
part of 2 days.
And I wonder too, again, maybe not. We've got people in Boulder. It could be that we could have a long day and it could be in Silverthorne, which is closer for Commissioner Harvey, and Boulder is the same as Denver. And I don't know, we could make just a picnic out of it.
Mhm.
Oh, we wanted to be in Denver. That's right.
Oh, yeah. for the
Yeah,
state
and
stuff.
I think that.
You're always welcome to meet in my building. I'm just offering.
Mhm.
Anytime you want to be in the mountains.
So August 12th, and we'll pull down August 13th. So you can plan your schedules accordingly.
Great, good. It's like fun. And there are chickens at this lek.
Have you?
Are
I'm just checking, because I'm not that excited about getting up at 3 in the morning to see a lek and no chickens.
We are being guided by the best at CPW. The staff, people involved will deliver us chicken.
Okay, good.
I haven't been up at 3 in the morning in decades.
I say just stay up all night, it's easier.
No.
Especially if
Not
you've got
gonna happen
in at
either.
3 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so.
All right.
Does anyone have anything else to add?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Before we reconvene tomorrow morning at 8? All right, thanks everyone for a productive workshop and a fun day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.